What happens when a lone human smuggler crash lands into an alien empire's forbidden ritual? Meet Eli Zane, a drifter with nothing but his ship and his wits, chosen by the radiant Queen Lyra and fiery Princess Zara for a cosmic bond that could save, or shatter, the galaxy. Will his defiance outshine the stars? Let's find out. In the endless expanse of the cosmos, where stars burned like the dreams of gods, a lone human pilot named Eli Zane hurtled through the void. His ship, the Starlance, was a battered relic of Earth's forgotten wars, patched together with grit and ingenuity. Eli's eyes, sharp as the edge of a comet's tail, scanned the controls, his fingers dancing over the console with a grace that belied his rugged exterior. He was no ordinary man, not out here, in the heart of the Zovara Empire, where humans were little more than curiosities, scorned as primitive by the galaxy's elite. But Eli didn't care for their disdain. He had a job to do: deliver a crate of rare Terran crystals to the royal court of Zovara, a mission that could secure his freedom from the bounty hunters nipping at his heels. The stars blurred past his cockpit, and Eli's thoughts drifted to the rumors he'd heard on the fringe worlds, whispers of Zovara's legendary rulers, the radiant Queen Lyra and her fiery daughter, Princess Zara. They were said to be beings of unearthly beauty, their skin shimmering like molten silver, their eyes glowing with the light of twin suns. The Zovarans, with their fox-like ears and flowing white hair, were a race apart, their culture steeped in rituals as ancient as the cosmos itself. Eli smirked at the thought. To him, they were just another client, another paycheck. Or so he told himself. The Starlance shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and the planet Zovara loomed into view, a jewel of violet oceans and crystalline spires that pierced the heavens. Eli's breath caught in his throat. No holovid could capture the sheer majesty of this world. As his ship descended toward the capital city of Orales, a squadron of sleek Zovaran interceptors materialized around him, their hulls gleaming like liquid starlight. A voice, melodic yet commanding, crackled through his comms. "Terran vessel, identify yourself or be reduced to ash." Eli leaned back in his seat, his lips curling into a roguish grin. "This is Eli Zane, captain of the Starlance. I've got your crystals, courtesy of Earth's finest smugglers. Permission to land." There was a pause long enough to make Eli's pulse quicken. Then the voice returned, softer now, almost curious. "Permission granted. Proceed to the royal spire. Do not deviate, human." The word human dripped with disdain, but Eli didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. As his ship glided through Zovara's atmosphere, he caught his reflection in the cockpit glass, tousled black hair, a scar running jagged across his jaw, and eyes that held a spark of defiance. He wasn't here to bow and scrape. He was here to survive. The royal spire was a marvel, a towering structure of translucent crystal that pulsed with an inner light. Eli landed on a platform suspended high above the city, where Zovaran guards awaited him, their fur-lined armor glinting in the twilight. They moved with predatory grace, their fox-like ears twitching as they sized him up. Eli stepped out, the crate of crystals slung over his shoulder, his leather jacket creaking as he moved. The air was thick with the scent of alien flora, sweet, intoxicating, and utterly foreign. "Follow," one of the guards barked, leading him through a labyrinth of glowing corridors. The walls seemed alive, whispering with faint harmonics that sent shivers down Eli's spine. He kept his head high, ignoring the curious stares of passing Zovarans. Their eyes lingered on him, not with hatred, but with something else, intrigue, perhaps, or something deeper. At last, they reached the throne room, a cavernous chamber where light danced like liquid fire. At its center sat Queen Lyra, her presence commanding the very air around her. Her white hair cascaded like a waterfall, framing a face of breathtaking beauty. Her eyes, twin pools of emerald light, locked onto Eli with an intensity that made his heart stutter. Beside her stood Princess Zara, her daughter, a vision of youthful fire. Zara's silver skin shimmered faintly, and her gaze was sharper, more defiant, as if daring Eli to prove himself worthy of their attention. Eli set the crate down with a deliberate thud, breaking the silence. "Your crystals, as promised," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of their stares. "Pure Terran quartz, rare as a supernova. I trust the payment's ready." Lyra's lips curved into a smile, subtle but electrifying. "You are bold, human," she said, her voice a melody that seemed to wrap around his soul. Few dare to speak so directly in our presence. Zara stepped forward, her movements fluid, her fur-lined robes whispering against the floor. He's insolent, she said, her tone laced with amusement. But there's something intriguing about him. Isn't there, Mother? Eli raised an eyebrow unfazed. I get that a lot, so about that payment. Lyra rose from her throne, her presence filling the room like a tidal wave. Payment will come, Eli Zane, but first we have a proposition. She glided toward him, her eyes never leaving his. The crystals you've brought are more than mere trade goods. They are sacred to our people, tied to an ancient ritual. And you, human, have been chosen to partake in it. Eli's stomach twisted, but he kept his expression neutral. Chosen? For what exactly? Zara's laughter was like the chime of bells, sharp and teasing. Oh, you'll see, she said, circling him like a predator. It's not every day a human catches the eye of Zovara's royal blood. Eli's mind raced. This wasn't part of the plan. He was a smuggler, a drifter, not some pawn in an alien game. Yet the way Lyra's gaze held him, the way Zara's smile promised secrets untold, stirred something deep within him. A spark of curiosity, of desire, that he couldn't ignore. He was no stranger to danger, but this felt different. This felt like stepping into a storm he might not walk away from. All right, he said at last, his voice low, almost a challenge. Tell me about this ritual. Lyra's smile widened, and she gestured to the guards. Escort our guest to the Chamber of Stars. Prepare him for the rite of binding. As the guards closed in, Eli felt the weight of their stares, the pulse of the crystals in the crate, the electric hum of the throne room. He was no hero, no savior, just a man trying to make his way in a galaxy that didn't want him. But as he followed the guards, with Lyra and Zara watching him like twin stars in a night sky, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. The corridor stretched endlessly before him, its walls alive with shifting patterns of light. Eli's boots echoed on the crystal floor, each step a reminder of the line he was crossing. He didn't know what the rite of binding was, but he knew one thing. He wasn't just delivering crystals anymore. He was walking into the heart of Zovara, into a world of forbidden desires and cosmic stakes. And whatever came next, he'd face it the only way he knew how, with a grin and a spark of defiance that no empire could extinguish. Eli Zane's boots echoed through the crystalline corridors of the royal spire, each step a pulse in the charged silence that followed his departure from the throne room. The Zovaran guards flanked him, their fox-like ears twitching, their glowing eyes casting sidelong glances that were equal parts suspicion and fascination. The air was heavy with the scent of alien blossoms, a heady mix that made Eli's head swim, as if the very atmosphere of Zovara was conspiring to draw him deeper into its mysteries. He could still feel the weight of Queen Lyra's gaze, her emerald eyes burning into his soul, and Princess Zara's teasing smile, a promise of secrets yet to be unveiled. The rite of binding, whatever it was, loomed ahead like a star on the edge of a black hole, pulling him inexorably forward. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, its domed ceiling a mosaic of shimmering constellations that seemed to pulse with life. The Chamber of Stars, they'd called it, and Eli understood why. The walls glowed with an otherworldly light, casting patterns that danced like liquid fire across the floor. At the center stood a circular platform, etched with runes that hummed with faint energy. The guards halted at the entrance, their postures rigid, and one gestured for Eli to step forward alone. He squared his shoulders, the crate of Terran crystals still slung over his back, its weight a reminder of the deal that had brought him here. But this was no longer about a paycheck. Something far greater was at play, and Eli could feel it in the way his heart pounded, in the electric thrill that coursed through his veins. As he approached the platform, a soft hum filled the air, and the runes began to glow brighter, their light bathing him in a warm, tingling sensation. He set the crate down, its contents clinking softly, and straightened, his eyes scanning the chamber. He was alone, or so he thought. A faint rustle of fabric broke the silence, and from the shadows emerged Queen Lyra, her presence as commanding as a supernova. Her white hair flowed like a river of starlight, and her fur-lined robes clung to her form, accentuating curves that seemed sculpted by the cosmos itself. She moved with a grace that was almost predatory, her eyes locked on Eli, their glow intensified by the chamber's light. "You are unafraid, Eli Zane," she said, her voice a low, melodic purr that sent a shiver down his spine. Most would tremble before the rite of binding. Yet you stand here, defiant, as if the stars themselves bow to you. Eli met her gaze, his lips twitching into a half-smile. I've faced worse than rituals, Your Majesty. Bounty hunters, plasma storms, a few rogue AIs. Whatever this is, I can handle it. Lyra's laughter was soft, like the chime of distant bells, but there was an edge to it, a hunger that made Eli's pulse quicken. Bold words, she said, stepping closer, so close he could feel the warmth radiating from her silver skin. But the rite is no mere test. It is a union of souls, a weaving of fates. The crystals you brought are its heart, and you, human, are its catalyst. Before Eli could respond, another figure emerged from the shadows. Princess Zara, her movements lighter, more playful, but no less captivating. Her hair, a cascade of white, shimmered with flecks of gold, and her eyes, a deeper shade of emerald than her mother, sparkled with mischief. She wore a gown that seemed woven from starlight itself, its fabric clinging to her lithe frame, leaving just enough to the imagination to set Eli's mind ablaze. He's more than a catalyst, Mother, Zara said, her voice a teasing lilt. Look at him. There's fire in his eyes, a spark no Zovaran could match. Eli raised an eyebrow, his grin widening despite the tension coiling in his chest. Flattery's nice, Princess, but I'd rather know what I'm getting into. This rite, what does it do? Zara circled him, her movements slow and deliberate, her gaze trailing over him like a caress. The rite of binding is ancient, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to echo in his bones. It ties the essence of two beings, or more, through the power of the crystals. It's a sacred act, one that can elevate or destroy. And you, Eli Zane, have been chosen to bind with us. Eli's breath caught, his mind racing to process her words. Bind with us. The implication hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating, like the scent of the chamber itself. He glanced at Lyra, whose expression was unreadable, her eyes glowing with an intensity that made his skin prickle. You're saying I'm supposed to marry you both? He asked, his tone half joking, half challenging, though his heart pounded at the thought. Lyra stepped closer, her hand brushing the edge of the platform, her fingers tracing the glowing runes. Not marriage in the human sense, she said, her voice soft but firm. The rite is deeper, more profound. It is a merging of spirits, a sharing of power. But yes, it is intimate, and it is forbidden for one such as you, a human, to partake in it. Zara stopped her circling, standing so close that Eli could feel the heat of her breath against his cheek. Forbidden, she murmured, her lips curving into a smile that was both playful and dangerous. But that's what makes it so enticing, don't you think? Eli's throat tightened, his body caught in the pull of their presence. Lyra's regal authority and Zara's fiery allure were like twin stars, each drawing him in with a force he couldn't resist. He was a smuggler, a man who thrived on the edge of danger, but this was a different kind of peril, one that stirred desires he hadn't known he possessed. And if I say no? He asked, his voice low, testing the waters. Lyra's eyes darkened, and for a moment the air seemed to thicken with an unspoken threat. You may refuse, she said, her tone cool but laced with a warning. But the crystals have chosen you, Eli Zane. To deny the rite is to invite chaos, not just for you, but for Zovara. Zara's hand grazed his arm, her touch light but electric, sending a jolt through his body. Don't be so quick to run, human, she whispered, her lips brushing his ear. You might find you enjoy this. Eli's mind spun, torn between instinct and curiosity. He'd walked into traps before, but none like this. The chamber's light pulsed faster now, the runes glowing brighter, as if responding to the tension between them. He could feel the crystals in the crate behind him, their energy humming in sync with the platform, with Lyra and Zara, with his own racing heartbeat. This wasn't just a ritual, it was a dance, a game of power and desire, and he was at its center. All right, he said at last, his voice steady despite the fire in his veins. Let's see what this rite is all about. But I'm warning you, I don't play by anyone's rules but my own. Lyra's smile returned, slow and enigmatic, as she stepped onto the platform, her robes trailing like a comet's tail. We shall see, human, she said, her voice a promise and a challenge. Prepare yourself. The rite begins at the zenith of Zovara's moons. Zara lingered a moment longer, her eyes locked on his, her smile a mix of amusement and something deeper, something that made Eli's blood sing. Then she joined her mother on the platform, their silhouettes framed against the glowing constellations above. The guards retreated, leaving Eli alone with the two royals, the hum of the crystals growing louder, more insistent. The air was thick with anticipation, with the weight of what was to come. Eli took a deep breath, his hand resting on the crate, his mind alight with questions. What was the rite of binding? What did it mean to be chosen by the crystals? And why did the thought of standing between Lyra and Zara, caught in their orbit, fill him with both dread and a hunger he couldn't name? As the chamber's light pulsed like a heartbeat, he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just a smuggler passing through Zovara. He was a man stepping into a destiny that could either crown him or consume him. The chamber of stars pulsed with an energy that seemed to thrum through Eli Zane's very bones, the air thick with the scent of alien blossoms and the electric hum of the Terran crystals. He stood before the glowing platform, his heart a drumbeat in his chest. As Queen Lyra and Princess Zara faced him, their silhouettes framed against the constellation-lit dome like twin deities of a forgotten myth. Lyra's emerald eyes held a weight that could crush stars, while Zara's gaze danced with a fire that promised both danger and delight. The rite of binding, they had said, was no mere ritual. It was a merging of souls, a forbidden act that could reshape destinies. And Eli, a mere human in the eyes of the Zovara Empire, was its unlikely heart. The hum of the crystals intensified, a low vibration that seemed to sync with the rhythm of Eli's pulse. He glanced at the crate he'd carried, its contents glowing faintly through the seams, as if alive with purpose. Lyra's voice broke the silence, smooth as velvet yet sharp as a blade. "The moons of Zovara align," she said, her words resonating with the chamber's energy. "The rite begins now, Eli Zane. Step onto the platform." Eli hesitated, his smuggler's instinct screaming that this was a trap, a cosmic game he couldn't hope to understand. But the pull of Lyra's gaze, the challenge in Zara's smile, and the strange warmth of the crystals drew him forward. He stepped onto the platform, the runes beneath his boots flaring to life, their light wrapping around him like a lover's embrace. The air grew warmer, heavier, and Eli felt a tingling sensation, as if the chamber itself was reaching into his soul. Lyra moved first, her fur-lined robes whispering against the platform as she approached. She raised a hand, her fingers brushing the air, and the crystals in the crate levitated, floating into a perfect circle around the platform. Their light pulsed in time with the runes, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across Lyra's silver skin. "The crystals are the key," she said, her voice low, intimate, as if speaking only to him. "They bind us human to you. They will reveal your truth or your destruction." Zara stepped closer, her movements fluid, her eyes locked on Eli's with an intensity that made his breath hitch. "Don't look so worried, Eli," she teased, her voice a sultry whisper that sent heat racing through him. "This is no ordinary ritual. It's a dance of fates, and you're leading." Eli's lips twitched into a grin, masking the storm of emotions within him. "I'm no dancer, princess," he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "But I've got a knack for surviving. So, what's the catch? What happens when these crystals do their thing?" Before either could answer, the chamber shuddered, a deep tremor that sent ripples through the glowing walls. The crystals flared brighter, their light almost blinding, and a low, ominous hum filled the air. Eli's instincts kicked in, his hand reaching for the blaster at his hip, only to remember the guards had confiscated it. What the hell was that? He demanded, his voice cutting through the sudden tension. Lyra's expression darkened, her eyes darting to the dome above. "An intrusion," she said, her voice tight. "The rite has begun, and its power draws attention, unwanted attention." Zara's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a warrior's focus. She moved to the edge of the platform, her hand hovering over a hidden panel that glowed to life at her touch. "The Clithar," she spat, her voice laced with venom. "They've breached our outer defenses. They want the crystals, and they'll kill to get them." Eli's mind raced. The Clithar were a rogue faction, a race of insectoid marauders feared across the galaxy for their ruthlessness. He dodged their raids on the fringe worlds, but facing them in the heart of Zovara was another matter entirely. "You're telling me we're under attack," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos brewing around him. "Right in the middle of your sacred ritual." Lyra turned to him, her eyes blazing with a mix of determination and something softer, something that made Eli's heart skip. "The rite cannot be stopped," she said. "Its power protects us, but it also makes us a beacon. You, Eli Zane, are now part of this. Will you stand with us?" Before he could answer, the chamber's doors exploded inward, shards of crystal scattering like stars. A swarm of Clithar warriors poured in, their chitinous bodies glinting under the chamber's light, their mandibles clicking with hunger. Their leader, a towering creature with eyes like burning coals, pointed a clawed limb at the platform. The crystals, it hissed, its voice a grating screech, and the human who carries them. Eli's blood surged with adrenaline, his smuggler's instincts taking over. He grabbed the nearest crystal from the air, its surface warm and pulsing in his hand, and brandished it like a weapon. "You want these?" he shouted, his voice ringing with defiance. "Come and get 'em." The Clithar charged, their claws slashing through the air, but Lyra and Zara were faster. Lyra raised her hands, and the chamber's runes erupted in a wave of energy, forming a shimmering barrier that slowed the attackers. Zara leapt from the platform, her gown tearing to reveal a sleek, fur-lined armor beneath. She drew a curved blade from her side, its edge glowing with plasma, and met the Clithar head-on, her movements a blur of grace and fury. Eli didn't hesitate. He dove into the fray, the crystal in his hand pulsing with an energy he didn't understand but instinctively wielded. He swung it like a club, smashing it against a Clithar's carapace, the impact sending the creature skittering across the floor. The crystal flared brighter, its light searing the air, and Eli felt a surge of power coursing through him, as if the rite itself was fueling his strength. Lyra fought at his side, her movements a dance of elegance and precision. She wielded no weapon, but her hands wove patterns in the air, summoning bursts of energy that shattered Clithar armor like glass. "Stay close, Eli," she called, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The rite binds us, its power flows through you now." Zara spun through the battle, her blade a streak of light, her laughter wild and exhilarating. "Not bad for a human," she shouted, her eyes meeting Eli's for a fleeting moment, sparkling with admiration and something more. "Keep up, or I'll steal all the glory." The chamber was a maelstrom of light and sound, the clash of claws against crystal, the hum of the runes, the pulse of the crystals. Eli fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed, each swing of the crystal amplifying his strength, his senses sharper than ever. He was no soldier, no hero, but in that moment he was something more, a human standing against a galactic threat, side by side with Zovara's royals. As the last Clithar fell, its body crumbling under Zara's blade, the chamber fell silent, save for the fading hum of the crystals. Eli stood panting, the crystal still clutched in his hand, its light dimming but still warm. Lyra and Zara turned to him, their faces flushed with the thrill of battle, their eyes glowing with a new intensity. The barrier around the platform flickered and faded, and the runes pulsed softly, as if acknowledging their victory. Lyra stepped closer, her breath uneven, her silver skin glistening with sweat. "You fought well, Eli Zane," she said, her voice soft but charged with emotion. "The crystals have chosen wisely." Zara sheathed her blade, her smile returning, though it was softer now, almost vulnerable. "You're full of surprises, human," she said, her voice low, her gaze lingering on him in a way that made his skin burn. "The rite isn't over yet. What comes next might be even more dangerous." Eli's heart pounded, not just from the battle but from the weight of their words, their closeness, the unspoken promise in their eyes. The chamber's light pulsed once more, the crystals hovering around them, their energy a tangible force that seemed to draw them closer together. He didn't know what the rite would demand next, but he knew one thing. He was no longer just a smuggler caught in a cosmic game. He was a man bound to two extraordinary women, and the galaxy itself seemed to tremble at the possibilities. The Chamber of Stars was still, its glowing runes casting a soft light over the aftermath of the battle. Shattered Clithar carapaces littered the crystalline floor, their edges glinting like broken mirrors under the pulsing constellations above. Eli Zane stood at the center of the platform, his chest heaving, the Terran crystal still clutched in his hand, its warmth a lingering echo of the power that had surged through him moments ago. Queen Lyra and Princess Zara stood before him, their silver skin glistening with the sheen of exertion, their eyes locked on him with an intensity that made the air feel charged, electric. The rite of binding, interrupted by the Clithar attack, hung unfinished, its purpose still shrouded in mystery. Yet the way Lyra's gaze softened, the way Zara's smile hinted at secrets, told Eli that the real challenge was only beginning. Lyra stepped forward, her fur-lined robes trailing like a comet's tail, her presence as commanding as ever despite the chaos they just faced. "You've proven yourself in battle, Eli Zane," she said, her voice a melodic hum that seemed to resonate with the chamber itself. "But the right demands more than courage. It demands vulnerability." Eli raised an eyebrow, the crystal still warm in his grip. "Vulnerability?" he said, his tone laced with a smuggler's skepticism. "I just bashed a bug alien's skull in with a glowing rock. I'd say I'm holding up fine." Zara's laughter rang out, bright and teasing, cutting through the tension like a blade. She stepped closer, her torn gown revealing glimpses of the sleek armor beneath, her white hair falling in wild waves over her shoulders. "Oh, Eli," she said, her emerald eyes sparkling with mischief. "You're tough, I'll give you that. But this isn't about swinging crystals. The right is about bearing your soul and maybe a bit more." She winked, her smile daring him to blush. Eli didn't blush, smugglers didn't have the luxury, but he felt a heat creeping up his neck nonetheless. "You're gonna have to spell this out, princess," he said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm not big on cryptic alien rituals. What's next?" Lyra gestured to the platform, where the remaining crystals still hovered, their light pulsing in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. "The rite of binding requires a connection," she said, her voice low, almost intimate. "The crystals amplify the essence of those who stand within their circle. You must open yourself to us, Eli, as we will to you. Only then can the bond be sealed." Eli's stomach twisted, a mix of curiosity and unease. "Open myself? Sounds like you're asking for a lot more than a handshake." He glanced at Zara, who was watching him with a grin that was equal parts playful and predatory. "And what's with the we part, both of you?" Zara stepped onto the platform, her movements fluid, her gaze never leaving his. "That's right, human," she said, her voice a sultry purr. "Mother and I share the bond of Zovara's blood. The right demands us both. Think you can handle it?" Eli opened his mouth to fire back a retort, but before he could, the platform flared to life, its runes glowing brighter, the crystals spinning faster. A warm, tingling sensation washed over him, like a current running through his veins, and he felt an inexplicable pull toward Lyra and Zara. The air grew heavy, charged with an energy that made his skin prickle, his heart race. He was no stranger to danger, but this was different. This was intimate, raw, and utterly alien. Lyra joined Zara on the platform, standing so close to Eli that he could smell the faint, sweet scent of her skin, like starlight distilled into perfume. "The crystals respond to truth," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "They will reveal your heart, Eli Zane, and ours. There can be no deception here." Eli swallowed, his throat dry. "No deception, huh? Well, I'm an open book. Smuggler, drifter, guy who's allergic to being told what to do. What about you two? What's a queen and a princess hiding?" Zara's laugh was softer now, almost nervous, and she exchanged a glance with her mother. For the first time, Eli saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, a crack in her confident facade. "You're not the only one taking a risk, Eli," she said, her voice quieter. "The right binds us all. If it fails, it could shatter us, our minds, our spirits, and Zovara with it." The weight of her words hit Eli like a plasma blast. Dee walked into this thinking it was just another job, another deal to close, but now he was standing on the edge of something far bigger, something that could either save or destroy an empire. And yet, the way Zara's eyes lingered on him, the way Lyra's hand brushed his arm as she adjusted a crystal, made it hard to focus on the stakes. There was a warmth in their presence, a pull that went beyond the ritual, beyond the crystals. It was as if they saw something in him, a strength, a spark, that he'd never seen in himself. The platform's light intensified, and Eli felt a strange sensation, like a thread weaving through his thoughts, connecting him to Lyra and Zara in ways he couldn't explain. Images flashed in his mind. Lyra's regal grace, her loneliness as a queen bearing the weight of an empire. Zara's fierce spirit, her longing for freedom from her mother's shadow. He gasped, stumbling slightly, and Zara caught his arm, her touch firm but gentle. "Easy, human," she said, her voice a mix of concern and amusement. "The crystals don't mess around. They're digging deep." Eli steadied himself, his eyes flicking between the two women. "Digging deep? Feels like they're rearranging my brain. You didn't mention that part." Lyra's lips curved into a smile, a rare glimpse of warmth breaking through her regal mask. "The crystals reveal truths we cannot hide," she said. "They show us who you are, Eli Zane, and they show you us." Before Eli could process her words, the platform shuddered again, but this time it wasn't an attack. The crystals began to hum in unison, their light coalescing into a shimmering veil that enveloped the three of them. Eli's vision blurred, and he felt a rush of emotions, not his own, but theirs. Lyra's quiet strength, her unspoken yearning for connection, Zara's fiery passion, her fear of being bound by duty. And then something else, a flicker of desire, raw and unfiltered, that made Eli's breath catch. He looked at them, really looked, and saw not just a queen and a princess, but two women caught in the same cosmic dance as he was. "This is intense," he managed, his voice rough. "You're telling me you're feeling this too." Zara's grin returned, but it was softer, almost shy. "Oh, we're feeling it," she said, her hand still on his arm, her fingers lingering just a moment too long. "You're not what we expected, Eli. Most humans would have run by now. Or fainted." Eli chuckled, the sound breaking the tension. "Faint? Nah, I saved that for after a bad hyperspace jump. But seriously, what's the deal here? You're both looking at me like I'm the main course at a galactic feast." Lyra's eyes sparkled with amusement, a rare crack in her composed demeanor. "Perhaps you are, in a way," she said, her voice teasing yet laced with something deeper. "The right binds us, but it also tests us. And you, Eli Zane, are proving to be quite the test." The veil of light tightened around them, and Eli felt a pull, not just physical but emotional, drawing him closer to Lyra and Zara. He could sense their hearts, their fears, their desires, and it was overwhelming, intoxicating. He was a smuggler, a man who lived on the edge of the galaxy, but here, in the heart of Zovara, he was something more. A man caught in a web of forbidden love, where every step could lead to ecstasy or ruin. As the crystals pulsed brighter, their light bathing the platform in a radiant glow, Eli knew there was no turning back. The right was weaving them together, body and soul, and whatever came next would test him in ways no battle ever could. He met Lyra's gaze, then Zara's, and felt a spark of defiance ignite within him. If this was his destiny, he'd face it head-on, with a grin and a heart that refused to break. The chamber of stars seemed to hold its breath, the glowing veil of crystal light tightening around Eli Zane, Queen Lyra, and Princess Zara like a lover's embrace. The platform beneath them pulsed with a rhythm that matched the quickening beat of Eli's heart, the runes glowing brighter, their warmth seeping into his skin. The air was thick with the sweet, intoxicating scent of Zovaran blossoms, mingling with the electric hum of the Terran crystals that hovered around them, their light weaving a cocoon of radiant energy. Eli felt the weight of Lyra's gaze, her emerald eyes burning with a quiet intensity, and Zara's playful smile, now softened with a vulnerability that made his chest ache. The rite of binding was no longer just a ritual, it was a force, pulling them together, body and soul, in a dance that felt both sacred and dangerously intimate. Eli stood at the center of the platform, his breath shallow, the crystal in his hand pulsing in time with the energy around him. The emotions he'd felt moments ago, Lyra's loneliness, Zara's longing, lingered in his mind, as if the crystals had woven their hearts into his own. He could feel their presence, not just physically but in a deeper, almost primal way, as if the boundaries between them were dissolving. "This is getting intense," he said, his voice low, rough with the effort to stay grounded. "You sure these crystals know what they're doing?" Lyra stepped closer, her fur-lined robes shimmering under the chamber's light, her silver skin catching the glow like a starlit sea. Her hand brushed his, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him, warm and electric. "The crystals do not err, Eli Zane," she said, her voice a soft melody that seemed to wrap around his soul. "They amplify what is true. Your heart, your desires, they are laid bare now, as are ours." Zara moved to his other side, her gown clinging to her curves, the torn edges revealing glimpses of her lithe form. Her touch was bolder, her fingers grazing his shoulder, lingering just long enough to make his pulse race. "Don't fight it, Eli," she whispered, her breath warm against his ear, her emerald eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and something deeper, something that made his blood sing. "The right is about surrender, not to us, but to what we could become together." Eli's throat tightened, his mind caught in a whirlwind of sensation and emotion. He was a smuggler, a man who thrived on control, on keeping one step ahead of the galaxy's dangers. But here, in the heart of Zovara, with Lyra and Zara so close, their warmth and scent enveloping him, he felt that control slipping. The crystals, light pulsed faster, their energy a tangible force that seemed to draw them closer, their bodies inches apart, the air between them charged with unspoken promises. "The rite requires unity," Lyra said, her voice steady but laced with a hunger that made Eli's skin prickle. She stepped onto the platform's center, her hand guiding Eli's to place the crystal he held into a glowing socket at its heart. The moment it connected, the platform flared, a wave of warmth washing over them, and Eli felt a rush of sensations. Lyra's strength, Zara's fire, and his own defiance, blending into something new, something overwhelming. Zara's hand found his other arm, her touch firm, grounding. "Feel it, Eli," she said, her voice a soft command. "Let the crystals guide you. Let us guide you." The veil of light tightened, and Eli's vision blurred, his senses flooded with their presence. He could feel Lyra's heartbeat, steady and regal, and Zara's, quick and wild, as if they were part of him now. The chamber seemed to fade, the stars above blurring into a sea of light, and for a moment it was just the three of them, bound by the crystal's power. Lyra's hand slid to his chest, her fingers resting over his heart, her touch warm through the fabric of his jacket. Zara leaned closer, her lips brushing his jaw, a feather-light caress that sent a shiver down his spine. Eli's breath hitched, his body responding to their closeness, to the heat of their touch. This isn't what I signed up for," he managed, his voice thick, a half-hearted attempt at humor to mask the fire building within him. "I was just supposed to deliver some shiny rocks." Zara's laugh was soft, intimate, her lips still close enough that he could feel her breath. "Oh, Eli," she murmured, her fingers trailing down his arm, leaving a trail of warmth. "You're so much more than a delivery boy. The crystals chose you for a reason, and so did we." Lyra's hand moved to his face, her touch gentle but commanding, turning his gaze to meet hers. Her eyes glowed with an intensity that made his heart stutter. And for the first time, he saw not just a queen, but a woman who carried the weight of an empire, yet yearned for something more. "The rite binds us," she said, her voice a whisper that seemed to echo in his soul. "But it is your choice, Eli Zane. Will you embrace it?" The crystal's hum grew louder, their light enveloping them in a radiant cocoon. Eli felt their emotions, Lyra's longing, Zara's passion, merging with his own, a tide of desire that threatened to sweep him away. He was no stranger to temptation, but this was different. This was a connection that went beyond the physical, a merging of hearts and minds that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. He looked from Lyra to Zara, their faces illuminated by the crystal's glow, their beauty otherworldly yet achingly real. "I'm not one for ceremonies," he said, his voice low, a grin tugging at his lips despite the intensity of the moment. "But if this is what it takes to keep Zovara from falling apart, and to keep you two from driving me crazy, I'm in." Zara's smile widened, her hand slipping to the back of his neck, her touch bold and teasing. "That's the spirit, human," she said, her voice a playful lilt. "Let's see how much you can handle." Lyra's fingers tightened slightly on his face, her gaze unwavering. "Then let the rite complete its work," she said, and with a graceful motion, she pressed her palm against the platform's central rune. The crystals flared, their light blinding, and Eli felt a surge of energy, like a star igniting within him. His senses sharpened, his body alive with sensation, the warmth of Lyra's touch, the softness of Zara's breath, the electric pull of their shared connection. The veil of light pulsed, and Eli felt their emotions flood him. Lyra's quiet strength, Zara's fiery spirit, and his own stubborn defiance, weaving together into something new, something unbreakable. Their hands lingered on him, their closeness a silent promise, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The chamber, the crystals, the empire itself faded, leaving only the three of them, bound by a force that defied the stars. As the light began to dim, the crystals settling into a soft glow, Eli felt a shift within him, a clarity, a strength he hadn't known he possessed. He looked at Lyra and Zara, their faces radiant, their eyes filled with a mix of awe and desire. The rite wasn't over, he knew that much, but whatever came next, he was ready. He was no longer just a smuggler, a drifter on the galaxy's edge. He was a man caught in a forbidden love, a human who had dared to step into the heart of Zovara and who might just conquer it. The chamber of stars seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the radiant glow of the Terran crystals softening to a gentle shimmer, their energy lingering in the air like a whispered promise. Eli Zane stood on the glowing platform, his heart still racing from the intensity of the rite of binding. His senses alive with the warmth of Queen Lyra's touch and the electric spark of Princess Zara's closeness. Their hands had left trails of fire on his skin, their emotions, Lyra's quiet yearning, Zara's fiery passion, woven into his own through the crystal's power. The veil of light that had enveloped them was fading, but the connection between them felt stronger, deeper, as if the stars themselves had forged an unbreakable bond. Eli's breath steadied, his smuggler's grin returning, though his mind buzzed with the weight of what they'd just shared. He was no longer just a man caught in a cosmic ritual, he was part of something greater, something that could reshape the galaxy. Lyra stepped back, her silver skin catching the chamber's light, her emerald eyes glowing with a mix of reverence and something softer, more vulnerable. "The rite is nearly complete," she said, her voice a melodic hum that seemed to resonate with the platform's runes. "You have faced its trials, Eli Zane, and proven yourself worthy, but there is one final step." Zara's hand lingered on Eli's arm, her fingers warm, her smile a blend of mischief and awe. "You've got more in you than I thought, human," she said, her voice low, teasing, but with a hint of respect that made Eli's chest tight. "One last test and we'll be bound forever." Eli raised an eyebrow, his grin widening despite the intensity of the moment. "Forever's a long time, princess," he said, his tone light but his eyes sharp. "What's this final step? More glowing rocks? Another alien invasion?" Lyra's lips curved into a smile, but before she could answer, the chamber's light flickered, a sudden stutter that sent a chill through the air. The runes dimmed, then flared erratically, and the crystals hovering around the platform began to pulse out of sync, their hum turning discordant. Eli's instincts kicked in, his hand tightening on the crystal still embedded in the platform's center. "That doesn't sound good," he muttered, his gaze darting between Lyra and Zara. "What's happening?" Zara's playful demeanor vanished, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the chamber. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice sharp. "The crystals, they're destabilizing." Lyra moved swiftly to the platform's edge, her hands tracing the runes, her expression taut with urgency. "The rite has been disrupted," she said, her voice steady but laced with a rare edge of fear. "The energy is fracturing. If we don't stabilize it, the bond will collapse, and so will this chamber." Eli's mind raced, his smuggler's pragmatism clashing with the surreal weight of the moment. "Collapse, as in, we all go boom?" He glanced at the crystals, their light now flickering like a dying star. "Tell me there's a fix for this." Before Lyra could respond, a low, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, not from the platform but from the very walls themselves. It was deep, ancient, and unmistakably alien, its tone carrying a weight that made Eli's skin crawl. "The human is not worthy," it said, each word vibrating through the air like a thunderclap. "The rite is flawed. He defiles the sacred bond." Eli froze, his heart pounding as the voice seemed to pierce his mind, cold and unyielding. Lyra and Zara exchanged a glance, their faces pale, their eyes wide with shock. "The voice of Zovara," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. "The ancient guardian of the crystals, it has awakened." Zara's hand tightened on Eli's arm, her touch no longer teasing but desperate. "This isn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "The voice hasn't spoken in centuries. It judges the right and it's judging you." Eli's jaw clenched, his defiance flaring despite the fear creeping up his spine. "Judging me? For what? I didn't ask to be here." He turned to the platform, the crystal in its center pulsing erratically, its light casting wild shadows across the chamber. "If this voice thinks I'm not good enough, it can come out and say it to my face." As if in response, the chamber shuddered, the runes flaring red, and the crystals began to spin wildly, their energy crackling like lightning. The air grew heavy, oppressive, and Eli felt a pressure in his mind, as if an unseen force was probing his thoughts, his memories, his very soul. Images flashed before him, his childhood on Earth's fringes, scraping by in the shadow of war. His years as a smuggler, dodging bounty hunters and cutting deals, the faces of those he'd lost, those he'd failed. The voice was relentless, its presence a cold blade slicing through his defenses. "You are an outsider," it boomed, its voice echoing in his bones. "A human, weak and fleeting, you cannot bear the weight of Zovara's legacy. The bond will break and the empire will fall." Eli staggered, the pressure overwhelming, but Lyra's hand found his, her touch grounding him, her strength flowing into him like a lifeline. "Fight it, Eli," she said, her voice fierce, her eyes blazing with determination. "The voice tests your resolve. Show it who you are." Zara pressed closer, her body warm against his, her breath quick. "You're not weak," she said, her voice a mix of urgency and belief. "You fought the Clithar, you stood with us. Prove it wrong, Eli, prove you belong." The words ignited something within him, a spark of defiance that burned brighter than the crystal's light. Eli straightened, his gaze fixed on the platform's central crystal, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. He didn't know what the voice was or why it doubted him, but he'd faced worse odds, pirates, storms, entire fleets, and come out alive. He wasn't about to let some ancient alien ghost tell him he wasn't enough. "All right, you oversized crystal whisperer," Eli said, his voice cutting through the chamber's hum, his grin fierce and unyielding. "You want to judge me? Fine, but I'm not here to grovel. I'm Eli Zane, and I don't break." He reached for the central crystal, his hand trembling but resolute, and as his fingers closed around it, a surge of energy exploded through him. The chamber roared, the runes blazing white-hot, and Eli felt the voice's presence intensify, its cold scrutiny clashing with his defiance. But something else stirred within him, a warmth, a connection to Lyra and Zara, their emotions flowing through the crystals, bolstering his resolve. He saw flashes of their lives, Lyra's centuries of sacrifice, Zara's rebellion against her fate, and realized the bond wasn't just about him. It was about them, about Zovara, about a future they could forge together. The crystals flared, their light coalescing into a blinding wave, and the voice screamed, a sound that shook the chamber's walls. "You dare defy the ancient will." It roared, but Eli held firm, his hand gripping the crystal, his heart pounding with a strength he hadn't known he possessed. "I'm not just defying you," he said, his voice steady, ringing with the fire of a human who'd faced the galaxy and survived. "I'm claiming this bond for them, for me, for Zovara." The chamber erupted in light, the crystals stabilizing, their hum harmonizing once more. The voice fell silent, its presence retreating like a receding tide, and Eli felt a rush of clarity, of power, as if the bond had snapped into place. Lyra and Zara gasped, their hands tightening on his, their eyes wide with awe and relief. The platform's runes glowed softly now, their energy calm, and the crystals settled into a gentle orbit, their light warm and steady. Eli let out a shaky breath, his grin returning as he looked at Lyra and Zara. "Well," he said, his voice rough but laced with humor, "that was one hell of a performance review." Zara laughed, her tension breaking, her hand still on his arm, her touch warm and reassuring. "You're impossible, Eli," she said, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "But you did it. You silenced the voice." Lyra's gaze was softer, her hand lingering on his, her voice a quiet melody. "You are more than we could have hoped for, Eli Zane," she said. "The bond is sealed, but its true test lies ahead." Eli's heart raced, the weight of their words sinking in. The right had bound them, but the voice's challenge had revealed a truth he hadn't expected. This wasn't just about love or power. Something greater was at stake, and he was at its heart. As the chamber's light bathed them in a soft glow, he knew the journey was far from over, and the galaxy had more surprises in store. The chamber of stars pulsed softly now, its runes casting a gentle glow that bathed Eli Zane, Queen Lyra, and Princess Zara in a warm, ethereal light. The crystals hovered in a serene orbit, their hum a quiet melody that seemed to echo the newfound harmony between them. Eli stood on the platform, his hand still tingling from the surge of energy that had silenced the voice of Zovara, his heart pounding with the weight of what he'd just done. He'd faced an ancient guardian, defied its judgment, and sealed the rite of binding. Not just with his defiance, but with the shared strength of Lyra and Zara, their emotions woven into his through the crystal's power. Their hands lingered on him, Lyra's touch steady and grounding, Zara's warm and teasing, and Eli felt the bond between them. A connection that was both exhilarating and unnerving. He was no longer just a smuggler caught in a cosmic ritual. He was a man bound to two extraordinary women, and the galaxy seemed to hold its breath for what would come next. Lyra stepped back, her silver skin shimmering under the chamber's light, her emerald eyes glowing with a mix of pride and something deeper, something that made Eli's chest tighten. "The bond is sealed," she said, her voice a soft melody that carried the weight of centuries. But its strength will be tested, Eli Zane. The Empire watches, and not all will welcome a human in our midst. Zara's fingers brushed Eli's arm, her touch lingering, her smile a blend of mischief and warmth. You've got the whole of Zovara buzzing now, Eli, she said, her voice light but her eyes serious. A human silencing the voice. That's the kind of story that starts wars or revolutions. Eli grinned, though his mind raced with the implications. Revolutions, huh? I was just trying to get paid and get out, he said, his tone playful but his gaze sharp. But I guess I'm stuck with you two now. So, what's next? Do I get a crown, or are we diving into another alien death trap? Zara's laugh was bright, but it was cut short by a low rumble that shook the chamber. Softer than the Clithar attack, but no less ominous. The runes flickered, and a holographic display materialized above the platform, casting a cold blue light across their faces. It showed the royal spire's exterior, where a crowd of Zovarans had gathered, their fox-like ears twitching, their glowing eyes fixed on the spire's peak. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, their voices a mix of awe and outrage, and Eli caught fragments of their words. Human, blasphemy, chosen. Lyra's expression tightened, her regal composure faltering for a moment. The people have sensed the rite's completion, she said, her voice steady but laced with tension. They demand to see the one who has bound himself to Zovara's blood. Eli's stomach twisted, his smuggler's instincts flaring. See me. I'm not exactly a parade kind of guy, he said, his grin masking the unease creeping up his spine. What do they want, a speech? Or are they sharpening their pitchforks? Zara stepped closer, her hand slipping to his waist, her touch bold and reassuring. They're curious, Eli, she said, her voice low, her breath warm against his cheek. And maybe a little jealous. You've done what no Zovaran could, bound yourself to us. That's bound to ruffle some fur. Eli chuckled, but the sound was strained. Jealous? Great. Nothing says welcome to the Empire like a mob of angry aliens. He glanced at Lyra, whose eyes were fixed on the hologram, her face a mask of determination. So, what's the play? Do we face the crowd, or do I sneak out the back with my crystals? Lyra turned to him, her gaze piercing, her hand reaching for his, her fingers intertwining with his in a way that sent a shiver through him. There is no sneaking away, Eli Zane, she said, her voice firm but soft, like a command wrapped in silk. You are part of Zovara now. The people must see you, not as a human, but as our chosen. The word chosen hung in the air, heavy with meaning, and Eli felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. He was no hero, no prince, just a man who'd stumbled into a cosmic drama. But the way Lyra's hand fit in his, the way Zara's touch lingered, made him want to be more, not for the Empire, but for them. He took a deep breath, his grin returning, though it was tinged with nerves. All right, let's give Em a show, he said, but if they start throwing fruit, I'm blaming you too. Zara's laugh was infectious, her hand giving his waist a playful squeeze. Don't worry, human, she said, her eyes sparkling with mischief. We'll protect you, or at least I will. Mother's more about diplomacy than dodging tomatoes. Lyra's lips twitched, a rare hint of amusement breaking through her regal facade. Behave, Zara, she said, but her tone was warm, almost teasing. She turned to Eli, her hand still in his, her touch a quiet anchor. Come, Eli. The balcony awaits. The platform descended, the chamber's walls parting to reveal a wide balcony overlooking the city of Orales. The violet oceans shimmered below, the crystalline spires glinting under Zovara's twin moons. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a sea of glowing eyes and twitching ears, their fur-lined robes swaying in the night breeze. Eli felt exposed, his leather jacket and scarred jaw a stark contrast to the elegance of Lyra and Zara, who flanked him like twin stars. The crowd's voices swelled, some chanting in reverence, others hissing in dissent, and Eli's heart pounded, his smuggler's instincts screaming to run. Lyra raised a hand, her presence silencing the crowd, her voice carrying across the balcony like a melody. People of Zovara, she said, her tone commanding yet serene. The rite of binding is complete. Eli Zane, a human, has been chosen by the crystals, by our blood, by our will. He stands with us as one of us. The crowd erupted, a mix of cheers and protests, and Eli felt Zara's hand slip into his, her fingers squeezing his with a warmth that steadied him. Smile, Eli, she whispered, her lips brushing his ear, her tone teasing but supportive. They're just a little shocked. You're not exactly what they expected for royal arm candy. Eli snorted, the tension breaking for a moment. Arm candy? I'm more like the guy who crashes the party and steals the good wine, he muttered, his grin crooked but genuine. He stepped forward, his voice cutting through the crowd's din. Hey, Zovara, he called, his tone bold, defiant. I'm Eli Zane, and I didn't ask for this gig, but I'm here, so let's make it work, yeah. The crowd fell silent, their glowing eyes wide, and for a moment, Eli thought he'd made a terrible mistake. Then a ripple of laughter spread through the masses, followed by hesitant cheers, and Eli felt a surge of relief, mixed with a strange pride. He wasn't one of them, but he'd faced their guardian, fought their enemies, and bound himself to their royals. Maybe, just maybe, he could win them over. But the moment was shattered by a piercing screech from above, a shadow passing over the moons. A sleek black ship materialized, its hull glinting with an eerie light, and a holographic figure appeared before the balcony, a Zovaran noble, his eyes cold, his fox-like ears pinned back in anger. This is an outrage, he bellowed, his voice amplified across the city. A human, bound to our blood, the Empire will not stand for this blasphemy. The crowd roared, their voices fracturing into chaos, and Eli felt Lyra and Zara tense beside him. The noble's hologram glared at Eli, its gaze a blade of contempt. You will answer for this, human, it said. The Council of Elders demands your trial immediately. Eli's grin faded, his hand tightening on Zara's, his other still clasped in Lyra's. He'd faced bounty hunters, pirates, and ancient guardians, but this was different. This was politics, power, and a galaxy that wasn't ready for a human in its heart. As the crowd's shouts grew louder, the ship looming above, Eli knew the real fight was just beginning. And it wasn't just his life on the line, but the bond he'd forged with Lyra and Zara. A bond that could either save Zovara or tear it apart. The night air of Zovara crackled with tension, the twin moons casting a silver glow over the balcony of the royal spire where Eli Zane stood, flanked by Queen Lyra and Princess Zara. Below, the crowd of Zovarans churned like a stormy sea, their glowing eyes and twitching fox-like ears reflecting a mix of awe, anger, and uncertainty. The black ship loomed above, its sleek hull a dark omen against the starlit sky, and the holographic figure of the Zovaran noble glared down at Eli, his voice still echoing with accusations of blasphemy. The words trial and human hung heavy in the air, a challenge to the bond Eli had forged with Lyra and Zara through the rite of binding. Their hands were still in his, Lyra's steady and warm, Zara's firm and defiant, and Eli felt the weight of their connection, a thread of strength that tethered him to this moment, to this empire, to these two extraordinary women. He was no hero, just a smuggler who'd stumbled into a cosmic drama, but as the crowd's shouts grew louder, he knew he couldn't run from this fight. Lyra's grip tightened, her emerald eyes blazing with a regal fire as she faced the hologram. Lord Vexar, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade, calm yet unyielding. You dare challenge the will of the crystals, the will of Zovara itself. Eli Zane has been chosen, bound to us by the right. To deny him is to deny our legacy. The noble Vexar sneered, his holographic form flickering with disdain. A human, bound to our blood, he is an outsider, unfit to stand beside you. The Council of Elders will not allow this outrage to stand. Zara stepped forward, her white hair catching the moonlight, her torn gown and armor a testament to the battles they'd faced together. The Council can choke on their traditions, she said, her voice sharp, her eyes flashing with defiance. Eli fought the Clithar, silenced the voice of Zovara, and sealed the right. He's more Zovaran than you'll ever be, Vexar. The crowd murmured, some voices rising in support, others in protest, and Eli felt the weight of their scrutiny, 1,000 glowing eyes boring into him. He squeezed Zara's hand, then Lyra's, drawing strength from their touch. You know, he said, his voice loud enough to carry over the din, his smuggler's grin returning, I'm starting to think you Zovarans have a thing for drama. I came here to drop off some crystals, not to start a revolution. But if it's a fight you want, I'm game. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd, breaking the tension, and Eli caught a glimpse of Zara's amused smirk, her fingers giving his a playful squeeze. Lyra's lips twitched, a rare warmth softening her regal mask, but Vexar's hologram loomed larger, his voice booming. You mock us, human. The trial will be your undoing. Step forward, or we will drag you to the council's chamber. Eli's grin faded, his heart pounding as he weighed his options. He could run, slip away in the chaos, steal a ship, and vanish into the galaxy's fringes. It's what the old Eli would have done, the smuggler who trusted no one but himself. But as he looked at Lyra, her strength a quiet anchor, and Zara, her fire a beacon in the dark, he knew running wasn't an option. Not anymore. The right had changed him, woven their hearts into his, and he'd be damned if he let some pompous, noble tear that apart. "All right, Vexar," Eli said, stepping to the edge of the balcony, his voice steady, ringing with a defiance that silenced the crowd. "You want a trial? Bring it on, but I'm not facing it alone." He turned to Lyra and Zara, his eyes meeting theirs, a silent question in his gaze. "You with me?" Lyra's hand tightened in his, her voice a soft promise. "Always, Eli Zane." Zara's smile was fierce, her fingers lacing through his with a warmth that made his blood sing. "Try keeping me away, human," she said, her tone teasing but her eyes fierce with loyalty. The crowd parted as the platform descended, carrying Eli, Lyra, and Zara to the base of the royal spire, where a massive crystal amphitheater awaited. The Council of Elders stood in a semicircle, their fur-lined robes shimmering, their glowing eyes cold with judgment. Vexar's hologram materialized at their center, his presence a dark shadow over the proceedings. The air was thick with anticipation, the crowd's murmurs a low hum, and Eli felt the weight of the moment, the galaxy holding its breath. The head elder, an ancient Zovaran with silver-streaked hair, raised a hand, silencing the crowd. "Eli Zane," she said, her voice resonant, "you stand accused of defiling the rite of binding, of tainting Zovara's blood with your human presence. What say you?" Eli stepped forward, Lyra and Zara at his sides, their hands still in his, their strength a quiet fire that bolstered his own. "I say I didn't ask for this," he said, his voice clear, his grin defiant. "I was just a guy delivering crystals. But your queen and princess chose me, your crystals chose me, and I fought for Zovara when it counted. If that's a crime, then lock me up, but you'll have to lock them up too." The crowd gasped, and Vexar's hologram flickered with rage, but Lyra's voice rose, calm and commanding. "Eli Zane speaks the truth," she said, her eyes sweeping the council, the crowd, the stars above. "The crystals chose him as they chose us. He fought the Clithar, silenced the voice, and sealed the right. He is not an outsider, he is our bond, our strength, our future." Zara stepped forward, her voice fierce, her hand never leaving Eli's. "You want to tear us apart?" she said, her eyes blazing. "Try it, but you'll have to go through me first." The crowd erupted, cheers drowning out the protests, and Eli felt a surge of pride, of belonging that he'd never known. The head elder raised her hand again, her expression softening, her eyes studying Eli with a new curiosity. "The crystals have spoken," she said at last, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the amphitheater. "The bond is true. Eli Zane is no outsider. He is Zovara's chosen, bound to our queen and princess." Vexar's hologram roared in protest, but the elder's gesture cut him off, the hologram dissolving into sparks. The crowd cheered louder, their voices a wave of acceptance, and Eli felt Lyra and Zara's hands tighten in his, their warmth a promise of what lay ahead. The elder stepped forward, placing a crystal medallion around Eli's neck, its glow matching the runes of the rite. "Welcome, Eli Zane," she said, her voice warm. "You are one of us." As the crowd's cheers echoed through the night, Lyra turned to Eli, her eyes glowing with a tenderness that made his heart ache. "You have given us more than you know," she said, her voice soft, her hand resting on his chest over the medallion. "You have given us hope." Zara leaned closer, her lips brushing his cheek, her voice a playful whisper. "And maybe a little trouble," she said, her smile wicked but warm. "But I like trouble." Eli laughed, the sound breaking the last of his tension, his arms wrapping around both women, pulling them close. "You're gonna regret picking me," he said, his grin wide, his heart full. "I'm not exactly the settle-down type." Lyra's smile was radiant, her hand finding his face, her touch a quiet vow. "We shall see, Eli Zane," she said, her voice a melody that prom. "I say the future unwrit." Zara's laugh was bright, her arm looping through his, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Oh, we'll keep you in line, human," she said. "Or maybe you'll keep us." As the crowd's cheers faded into the night, the three of them stood together, their bond a beacon under Zovara's moons. Eli looked out at the violet oceans, the crystalline spires, the stars that stretched into infinity, and felt a certainty he'd never known. He was no longer just a smuggler, a drifter on the galaxy's edge. He was a man who'd found his place, not just in Zovara, but in the hearts of two women who'd changed him forever. The Empire might face new challenges, new threats, but with Lyra and Zara by his side, Eli knew they could face anything. The stars were theirs, and their story was just beginning. Did Eli's defiance spark your imagination? Smash that like button if you're rooting for him. Subscribe and hit the bell to join our cosmic journey. More HFY adventures await. Drop a comment below. Would you face the council with Eli or run for the stars? Your support fuels our stories, so let's keep the galaxy spinning.